her well. Save her. Exactly will that be? You say you're not a savior, but you're not a savior to me. Apparently it's been too long since we first laid eyes on this. It's only been 3 short years. What could we possibly have missed? On the ceiling when the smoke clears, where will you be? Oh, on the ceiling when the smoke clears, where will you be? Don't worry about me. Oh, no, 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 no. Don't worry about me. Oh, no, 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 no.
All right, welcome to Freethinker Radio, KPFT Houston. You're just listening to Lion Among Men. We've been playing on Freethinker Radio for some time, that act and other acts that they've been involved in.
Was there an echo? Oh, there is an echo. No, we thought we did everything to avoid this. All right.
Is it gone?
No, it's still there. It's one of us. Let me see. Oh no, guys, this happened again. We might have to restart. We just did a sound check for this reason. Okay, am I echoing?
I turned off my headphones and I hear nothing.
Well, I don't think there's an echo right now. Is there an echo anymore?
Test.
All right, before we get the show started, if you're listening to this, first of all, sorry for this mishaps. But if you can hear this without any echo, let us know and we will continue. We sometimes have this issue figuring out the audio equipment. Sorry.
Woohoo! All right, we're glad to be here. Definitely glad to be broadcasting on KPFT. And we were talking about our history on radio on different stations and how happy we are to be on KPFT and to also be broadcasting on Float, YouTube, Facebook, etc. But our home is KPFT, and they've been a good home for us. 100,000 watts of power, broadcasting every Friday. If you're tuning in live in Houston Friday, we're glad to have you as listeners. And we need to stress to you, you've probably seen some of the economic things that are occurring, such as Ann Taylor and
you're saying your mic's a little low, Micah. Your mic's a little low, so they're saying they can't hear you as well. Sorry to interrupt you.
And Men's Warehouse and such declaring bankruptcy. And we've seen a lot of...
now there's the echo.
And we've seen a lot of this type of problems. And KPFT is not immune. You know, KPFT has struggled for 40 years to exist and to work hard, and they've managed to succeed for over 40 years. But now, in this time, is another time when KPFT is calling out for your help. They definitely need it. And if you've ever appreciated the station, appreciated alternative media, or appreciate what we're doing, we want to make sure we get that word out to y'all this episode. And we'll probably be back to that word. So it is our home. We love it, and it needs a lot of support. So go check out kpft.org if you haven't before. There's lots of ways you can contribute. Any amount is love.
Yeah, and for those who don't know, I mean, Micah and I have been broadcasting Freethinker Radio originally on Local Live Houston, an internet radio station. And we started that in summer 2011, and we did that for a number of years. And then we sort of did it independently, just as we continue today through the HoustonFreethinkers.com and the Conscious Resistance Network. And then I think 2016 or 17, we started doing a show on 90.1 KPFT Houston on their HD2 dial, which is really cool because it's, high definition radio. And a lot of the newer cars have FM and they have HD2, so we can be heard while people are driving around. And even though most people do consume their information through the internet, what I like about KPFT is that we're reaching a specific audience that we might not necessarily, find on the internet. People who aren't specifically coming to the Conscious Resistance or the Houston Freethinkers and looking for this information, but people who are just in Houston or driving through Houston on the FM dial, and then they hear us talking about all kinds of important things like we're going to be covering today. We have so much news related to Houston, cops, masks, as the show is titled, Mask Hysteria in Houston. So we are going to be talking a lot about the new mandates and tracking related to masks. We're going to get into all that. And towards the end of the show, we'll be talking about some financial things as well. So thank you guys again. Thank you to KPFT and everybody who's listening through the Conscious Resistance Network. As Micah said earlier, we're live at the Conscious Resistance on Float on YouTube and several pages on Facebook. So thank you guys for joining us. Let's go ahead and get right into this, Micah.
Definitely. And thanks for all the thumbs, comments. We want to know what people think. This is a chance. We want this show. And one of the most exciting aspects of it 10 years ago or so when we first started was these chats that would go on Facebook and other platforms during that time. People's ideas that we hadn't considered, new things that were coming in that were being sparked by the stories we were talking about. And honestly, that to me is one of the most exciting things about simulcasting on all these different networks like this. Derrick.
Absolutely. So, all right, well, let's get to it. Mayor Turner, this just a couple days ago, we're recording this on what today is today? Wednesday night. On Monday, Mayor Turner here in Houston announced that the Houston police will start enforcing the mask order with citations and $250 fines. Now, of course, the mask order has been taking place in Texas for, I guess, over a month now, probably 2 months from the governor of Texas. And people have been pushing for them to do more, lock things down, or try to enforce things like this, finding people. And the governor, Greg Abbott, pretty much said that, hey, I've passed the executive order. Nobody's enforcing it. So I think that encouraged places like Austin and Houston and elsewhere to step up and make these kinds of announcements. So the mayor's saying that as per the governor's executive order to grant the cops the authority to slow you down, question you, and asking you why you're not wearing a mask. And at the same time, yes, give you a $250 fine. After you've been issued a warning first, you will be issued a $250 fine. And, the police chief, Art Acevedo, who is, of course, not one of our favorite people here, who's always looking to make political statements. He's been out a lot lately. We're going to talk about him just a bit throughout these stories. He's basically agreeing with this and saying that because the tally of infected and quarantined officers has grown so quickly, with 108 testing positive and 64 waiting test results, that, quote, what we need is for people to stop worrying about selfish interests and think about the collective interest. We are better together, and we don't want to write tickets. We want people to do the right thing, to follow the science, and simply have the courtesy to wear a mask in public and follow the other health and safety guidelines that have been put out. So I have a number of issues with that. I won't get too long-winded about it, but clearly putting collective interest, I think, before self-interest. I do believe that there's a way to work collectively without abandoning the self and individuality and violating individual liberties and things of that sort. I also don't think that the science is settled on a lot of these issues. I mean, I saw some studies just today from the CDC themselves that were just published in May 2020 saying that, the masks aren't as effective as they have found in medical situations, like at preventing the flu virus, for example. So just different issues that we're not hearing about and that aren't really being presented to people. That are going on related to this, that I think it's not as simple as Acevedo saying, follow the science, do the right thing, etc. So,
I was reading another article that came out from, I guess it's basically from one of the local media, but it sums up a letter that the head of the police union sent them. And it basically says what you said about enforcing the governor's order and such. But what it mentions that I think is important is the exceptions to mask order. Because this is why you don't have to have a mask. If you're younger than 10, you don't have to have a mask. Any person with a medical condition that prevents wearing a face covering. And here's the one I like. Any person while the person is consuming food or drink. You hear that? Food or drink. So you better always have some food, drink, or a mask with you in Houston.
It's just crazy. I mean, I've heard people say this, like carry a bottle of water and some peanuts or something like that.
And so if you're exercising, etc., and it actually mentions this, which I think is kind of maintain safe distance from other people not in the same household. Okay, so they're going to know this, right? Any person driving alone is not required to have a mask.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you.
Or if your passengers are part of the same household. So,
well, and then you brought up this other one from Channel 11 here that was actually just reported today. This is like pretty new news, and the title is, I'll let you go over it, Micah, but it's called Simply Do the Right Thing and Wear the Mask.
Yeah,
HPD start tracking mask violations.
Yeah, now it's the right thing for sure, right? I mean, they say so it's the right thing. And I think that's interesting that they're going to start tracking these. It's kind of like tracking the new cases. We got to track everything with COVID because these many people must just not care about other people, or as you said, selfish. So let's see, it's going to get into here. But, this is a little bit of an interesting article, but it goes and makes a turn towards the end that I'd like to just focus on as we get there. So Houston Police Department will begin providing daily statistics. I mean, never mind murderers, rapists, and thieves. We're going to get the daily statistics on the warnings and the citations. So we're going to get not just the citations, but how many warnings they gave out for people refusing to wear a mask in public. The boss, Art Acevedo, made the announcement Wednesday after requests had been made for the latest data. So I guess people are asking the police for the data about how many people they were warning. Turner said, as you mentioned, that they will issue $250 fines to people who do not wear a mask. Acevedo explained tickets are typically entered into the system by the courts, which can take up to a week. In response, the chief directed his staff to create a code for mask violations. So we got a new code, huh?
Starting tomorrow.
Yeah, starting tomorrow, they're going to start tracking this. The code will be able to provide a 24-hour picture of how many citations are being issued. Quote, we are not interested in writing tickets. We don't want to write tickets. Mayor Turner does want us to write tickets, Acevedo said Wednesday. But we are interested in saving lives. We are interested in getting this community, this state, the nation, and ultimately the free world past COVID-19. The chief reiterated the need to wear a mask in public to stop the spread of COVID-19. Simply do the right thing and wear the mask, he said. Police officers, we have so much to deal with. We know what death is final, whether it's a traffic crash, the end of a gun, or a virus. But anyway, he gets in, and I do think the stats are maybe worth mentioning. He said as of Wednesday, 163 Houston Police Department employees are in quarantine, 138 classified and 25 civilians, 82 positive COVID-19 cases, and classified employees, and another 56 pending test results, 18 positive tests among civilian and 7 pending results. He added his department has seen 2 deaths among their support staff, and a total of 470 employees have been tested positive. And I think those stats, 2 out of 470 testing positive, that's probably about the same percentage we're seeing. But here's the part
for the rest of the population.
Yeah, that's about the standard death rate, I guess. I mean, I didn't do the math real quick, but they're not big numbers to do the math on. 2 over 400 and something. This is the part I kind of wanted to just focus on, and maybe I got a strange view of it. I don't know. Acevedo echoed sentiments from the mayor urging residents to get tested. So we're talking all about masks. We're talking about masks. We're spending all this time and energy on masks. Governors, executive orders fly. I mean, Sylvester says we got to write tickets. We don't want to write tickets, et cetera. All this stuff is about masks. And then in the final paragraph, and it's only 2 or 3 sentences, we get into testing. And this is the quote I want to focus on. Testing is not about how you are feeling. Testing is about identifying whether or not you are someone that can make someone very sick by spreading this virus, the chief said. Ultimately, testing is about saving lives. Wasn't masks about this too? Lives of your family members, your friends, your neighbors, your colleagues, and ultimately all of us here as first responders. So I kind of thought that was interesting as we've seen the creep. We've seen the creep of this. It's going to be a short shutdown, only this long, and then it's extended, then kicked off, and now on the mask warning, the mask penalty. What's next? It saves lives. He said so right here. Getting tested. And what's getting tested involved? Shoving a big thing up your nose?
Well, and we've talked about this on some of the episodes here on Freethinker Radio on 90.1 KPFT Houston and the Conscious Resistance. We've talked about the problems with the PCR tests themselves that many people have brought up. Also, we've talked about a number of examples of both false negatives and what are claimed as false positives as well, clearly false positives. And so there's just so much wrong with the testing in general. And like you said, they went from focusing on the masks. But I think overall the message, whether we agree with it or not, this is their message, is like, we need contact tracers, we need masks, we need social distancing, and we need mass testing. And then, of course, the next step that we're leading towards is the vaccines. We need the shutdowns until we have the vaccine. And just on that, Mike, I just want to mention briefly, because we're talking COVID and how to, all of these things we're seeing are part of what has been called the new normal, right? And so the way past,
sick of that phrase.
So am I. The way past the new normal, according to such intelligent people as Bill Gates and others, the only way to get out of this is to get the vaccine. And now they're saying that we might need multiple doses of the vaccine. Well, I just wanted to mention this one story, that there was a brand new piece of information that came out this week that the vaccine company AstraZeneca has admitted that they've been granted indemnity in a number of nations that they're already partnered with. They said they wouldn't talk which nations, but what that means is that they're basically given immunity for any liability should the people be injured by the vaccines. And they specifically have said, because if you don't give the vaccine manufacturers this indemnity, they won't be motivated to produce all these vaccines, even though they're using taxpayer dollars to do the whole thing.
Yeah, they got to get special free money, turn it up.
But I mean, like, what other industry is out there that gets protected from liability
and funded
by the taxpayers? Like, it's insane. But yeah, so that's going on this week in relation to this whole thing. So it's masks, it's shutdowns, it's testing, and soon it will be this vaccine, which not only are people going to be profiting off of and just ripping the people
When
off,
does it become, if you don't get the vaccine, you're not
dangerous,
safe? And that same little last sentence of Acevedo's that I read,
Yep, it's getting that way. Well, we're going to switch gears now, continue with some Houston news, though. This is related to the Harding Street raid, the Tuttle raid that we've been talking about for a year and a half now here on Freethinker Radio on 90.1 KPFT Houston. Of course, if you haven't heard this case, it did
make national news.
It did. It was all over the Washington Post and other mainstream and national news for a week or two. But it's the case of Dennis Tuttle.
Well, it keeps coming back.
In Houston, it's being paid attention. We got one NBC News story here where they're talking about it, but it's the deaths of Regina Nicholas and Dennis Tuttle and their dog in January 2019, 2018 or 2019? 2019, when they were killed by Houston Police Department officers who conducted a no-knock raid and claimed that there was drugs in the house, and we found out all these things to be lies. Those of you who are watching the video, what we're showing on the screen right now is the front door of their home, where you can see the bullets from the outside, where a forensic investigator determined that the HPD had fired into the house before they even, knocked the door down unannounced and not in uniform. But this latest piece of information, Micah, you got this one: 6 former Houston police officers indicted in botched drug raid that left 2 dead. More indictments.
Yeah, this one came out between last episode and now, and it is interesting that this keeps coming out. Initially it was a rogue cop, right? Initially it was they were horrible, bad drug dealers, and anybody that speaks out against it, we've got your number. Then it became, well, maybe there was a rogue cop, a rogue cop, right? Now it turns out a grand jury on Thursday indicted 6 former Houston police members with a total of 17 counts, 17 charges they're indicted for their roles in this basically murder. Then they want to keep calling it a drug raid, okay? But they lied about what they had on the drug raid. So
the media is still doing garbage job reporting on it.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was set up to be a drug raid, but not so much. The January 28, 2019 raid came under scrutiny after police alleged then Officer Gerald Goins, who was shot during the raid, lied in a search warrant that a confidential informant had bought heroin at the home, okay? Goins later acknowledged there was no informant and that he bought the drugs himself.
Made the whole thing up.
Yeah. His partner at the time, Stephen Bryant, 46, is accused of providing false information in a report after the raid that supported Goins' story about a confidential informant. Killed in the shooting were 58-year-old Regina Nicholas and 59-year-old Dennis Tuttle, and this story mentions it, and their dog, but it doesn't say his name, Star. Their family and friends have continuously dismissed allegations that the couple sold drugs. How long they lived there?
That's a nice way of saying there's no evidence.
Yeah. Yeah. Police found, small amounts of marijuana and cocaine in the home. Small amounts.
And that's not even completely accurate, because what they found, it was actually in their body. They said it was trace elements of what could have been,
like the breakdown.
Metabolized cocaine or something.
Okay. So at best, they probably found some marijuana or something, but no heroin. Okay, they were allegedly dealing black tar heroin and had illegal guns. So they got basically a no-knock raid where police just came in shooting, more or less. Well,
not to mention Dennis was a veteran.
Yeah, I didn't even know that, but I'm not surprised. That might have been one of the reasons they had that marijuana. He might have had some PTSD or something.
Yeah,
Goins had previously been and so, I'm so sorry to get off the case here, but we've seen since then how many other cases have come up that Goins had been involved in. Goins had previously been indicted on charges of felony murder and tampering with government records. He was indicted on additional felony counts Thursday. The felony murder charge carries a life sentence. Well, I mean, at least he'd get life. That's more than Starr got. Bryant had previously been indicted on charges of tampering with government records. 3 former supervisors and a former senior police officer were also indicted. See, they don't mention their names, okay? The charges stem from allegations that include using false information to get judges to sign search warrants. One of these false informations, to go down a tangent, is the illegal guns, saying they have illegal. It turned out in another story that in 100% of the no-knock raids that Officer Goins was involved in, he claimed there were illegal guns. And guess how many of those raids, of 100% of them that he reported, what percent did he recover illegal guns? 0, goose egg, not a 1. But they kept giving him these license to kill. What's it called? No-knock warrants. And he kept going out. So the charges stem from allegations using false information. Illegal guns. I saw illegal guns there. I bought heroin there. Like the girl I was sleeping with bought heroin there. Anyway, to get judges to sign false warrants, falsifying timesheets, basically lying about their time, stealing money, right there, point blank. But
who pays their salary?
I don't think they care. They just want the money. But I think it might be whoever bothers to pay, right? Taxes, yeah. Putting false information in offense reports and falsifying government documents to steal. Boy, that sounds like a lot of criminality. According to a statement released by Harris County DA, that was just released Friday, these indictments reinforce our decision to prosecute the graft, greed, and corruption in this troubled Houston Police Division. We look forward to presenting all of the evidence in a courtroom to a jury and the people of Harris County. The 6 officers were initially charged on July 1st, so it took over a year and a half to even charge them.
We have that story as well from July 1st when they first announced it. I don't know why they took another month to actually do it, but they first announced it in early July.
Yeah, Goins' attorney, and he seems to say the same thing always. This is inconsequential. There is no new information here, he says. This time, Ogg's announcement is just another opportunity for her to talk to the press about the same thing, not a shed of new information. I don't know. I've studied this story for a year and a half, and I didn't hear about these new indictments until now.
It's I think that there probably will be more if there's a real case going on. We got a couple more related to this that we're going to cover, showing actually, Micah, that the DA's office might be sitting on some evidence or potentially sidelining one of the investigators.
Let me just wrap this one up because there's a couple of last good points. The DA's office that said hundreds of defendants arrested by Goins have been notified that there are maybe problems with their convictions. The office has already found 2 brothers convicted in a case, and we covered this one before, in which Goins was the only witness against them. Maybe that's something we need to question, having only one witness and it be the accuser. And they were actually innocent of the charges, and one spent time in jail. So the Court of Criminal Appeals agreed that the man had been found innocent. So
more people getting locked up behind dirty cops losing their lives. Taxpayers.
They paid for the fraudulent timesheets.
Taxpayers having to fund to keep people in jail who are there fraudulently over cops who are lying, cops who are making up informants, cops who are lying about weapons and drugs. And just a little bit more in this case. In the last month, similar kind of situation that's evolving. There was a call since the very beginning to release what Acevedo said was a police audit that had been done by the department. They refused to release it up until early July. The Houston Chronicle editorial board put out a editorial saying enough stalling. Acevedo needs to release a police audit. Then a couple days later, they released it. HPD posted on their Twitter account, and the Chronicle followed up with an operation completely out of control. A damning HPD narcotics audit reveals hundreds of errors. And I'll post these links to you guys, but it basically just, as it says, shows all kinds of problems. Some of them things that Mike has already covered, but just showing that there's no accountability in this narcotics unit where Gerald Goins, who those of you who are watching, you can see is on screen right now. Gerald Goins and other officers were able to get away with these kinds of situations. And it seems like this particular narcotics unit is very corrupt, and they like to just chalk it up to sloppiness. But the editorial board of the Chronicle also followed up with this one: sloppiness or corruption. Only an independent audit of HPD narcotics will tell. And basically doing that, calling for a truly independent audit of the narcotics unit, because the police narcotics unit audit showed hundreds of errors. But the Chronicle and other people who have looked at it are saying it seems like there's probably more than what they're showing here. So they're calling for an independent audit. And it makes sense because the final story that I have related to the Tuttle raid that we've been talking about here is that another Chronicle story from about 2 weeks ago says that, quote, emails show independent investigator hired to assist Harris County District Attorney Kim Ogg has been sidelined. Last year, Harris County DA Kim Ogg went before the Commissioner's Court with a plea give me more money for more prosecutors to investigate the Harding Street raid. Commissioners allocated money for new prosecutors, and in October voted to spend $200,000 to hire Michael Bromwich, a widely respected internal investigator, to consult on the investigation of the narcotics raid that we've just been talking about. So I don't know, you might remember this, Mike. I definitely remember this from, I think, about a decade ago when the crime lab was a big thing here in Houston, all these rape kits and drug test kits not being checked. Well, Bromwich was the guy who led the independent review of HPD crime lab that led to all these changes. So they hired him for $200,000 of taxpayer money to be a part of the Tuttle raid. But now recently released internal emails and records show that the DA's office appears to have, quote, sidelined the independent consultant. In the 9 months since they voted to retain him, the only significant work he did was a 2-day work trip to Houston that totaled 17 hours of work. So in the 9 months that people, Houston's paying him $200,000, they've given him 17 hours of work. And it's not for, it seems according to the emails, it's not for him, not wanting to work, because the emails show that he actually communicated back and forth with the commissioner's court and with the DA's office, asking for, any sort of updates and how he can get some information. So it says Dane Schiller, spokesman for the Harris County DA's office, said in a statement that the case is being investigated using grand juries, which are secret by law and which many of us know are used to cover what they're doing. I mean, you could argue it could be used for good circumstances to protect people, but in many cases, especially in police cases, they seem to use grand juries to get cops off, and we never get to see the actual evidence that was presented or what the grand jury, whoever they were, decided and what was allowed in court. So it's a very good way to keep things private. And so they're arguing because it's being conducted by grand jury, this taxpayer-funded $200,000 a year guy can't have access to it. And they're basically like, we'll get to you when we can. And they said, quote, this most recent push by Mr. Bromwich to obtain secret information for billable hours is wholly inappropriate, and it is unimaginable that he's actually advocating that he be a part of the investigation. And he responded saying that his contract stipulated, quote, that he provide advice and guidance in connection with the department's review of more than 14,000 cases potentially tainted by the HPD narcotics unit involved in the January 2019 Harding Street raid. And he said, quote, as this makes clear, much more was contemplated than an after-action report, because they basically saying, once we're done, you can write the follow-up report, the after-action report. And so they're basically just expecting him to sit there while they do the whole investigation, and then he writes a sort of analysis of it. And he says, the guy who was hired says the DA's office has every right not to use me to provide services agreed to under the contract. They don't have the right to misrepresent what I was hired to do, nor to make false claims about me. So, they're trying to make it look like he's wanting to do something illegal by getting in this investigation, but the commissioner's court voted to give him $200,000 of taxpayer money to go on and be a part of this investigation. I mean, it's just crazy, dude. There's so much corruption related to the HPD narcotics unit, to the Tuttle raid, and
this is just one city.
This is just Houston, We're going to go to a music break now. We've been talking for a little while. We've covered quite a bit of Houston news. When we come back, I got one more Texas story. We're going to talk about, oh my God, have you seen what's going on?
Noise. Either way, we're talking about Australia. One of the songs that we get some of the most comments about here is when we play that Rose of the West Road song. And they sent us a CD all the way from Australia. And we send us tracks. You can send us CDs. We just love music. And yeah, we got a lot of other music we'd love to play, but we try to play the acts that we feel are coming up and actually benefit from being played on an FM station in the third or fourth largest city in the country. We like that.
All right.
Turning our young people as clones of our sense of reality we want them to have, because we control it. And we'll call it education. And it means that we'll take children from their parents at a very early age and we'll keep them there about 5 days a week at least, all the way through their formative years, and we'll pound them every day with our version of reality.
Burn your history books, kill your TVs. What you're being fed is disease. You are being led to dis-ease. Wake up your consciousness, live free. Burn your history books, kill your TVs. What you're being fed is disease. You are being led to dis-ease. Wake up your consciousness, live free. Everything you've been told is a lie. It's never questioned, and we get old over time. Slaves to the system, I won't step aside. You have 3 visions, open your eye. Drones in the sky, UFOs by their side. Anunnaki control, there's nowhere to hide. War and famine's profitable. No releases of cures for diseases, cause you won't be in the hospital. Santa Maria came over with 2 other ships. Star family's on board, but you don't hear about none of it. We're stuck in this public front of a government. Do what they say, not what they do. Well, I don't want to sit. Stop paying taxes, eat local, gain wisdom, seek global. Don't let the system control you. Remove the blindfolds for your own view. Burn your history books, kill your TVs. What you're being fed is disease. You are being led to dis-ease. Wake up your consciousness, live free. Burn your history books, kill your TVs. What you're being fed is disease. You are being led to dis-ease. Wake up your consciousness, live free.
Wake up, America, you passed out. Yo, wake up, can you hear me? Yeah, you blacked out. And that's how these corrupt cash cows created a black cloud. Now they acting like they don't want to back out the black house. Yeah, we getting killed while the president laughs. They created a system that was destined to crash. It's gonna fall, and when it does, it's gonna come down fast. And we gonna need a lot more than just our bug out bags. These gun-free zones say it's safe to walk. You can't get raped or robbed. If you do this, wait for cops. Maybe not, just pray to God you could just stay calm. Meanwhile, shots going off in the Navy Yard. From here to Kenya Mall, how can we tolerate it for any longer? Ain't it time that we make a call? We can't evolve and there's no hope for survival if we don't start to wake up and begin to open our minds up.
At a young age, taught to obey. Kill your brain cells, soda benzoate. This is Plato's allegory of a cave. We're living in the dark, imprisoned in our ways. Like sheep in a herd, we go about our days. You don't really know where your tax money goes, but debt gets higher and you have nothing, so a revolution's needed to grasp what we know. Storm Bohemian Grove on a late summer night. Disrupt the party and stay for the fight. A century of lies can't change overnight, but a start can happen. With a spark I'm rapping, let's march for action. Play a massive part when the stars come crashing. From the eye in the sky, turn on the panic. Put on your mask and smile. Release your heart from sadness. Burn your history books, kill your TVs. What you're being fed is disease. You are being led to dis-ease. Wake up your consciousness, live free. Burn your history books, kill your TVs. What you're being fed is disease. You are being led to dis-ease. Wake up your consciousness, live free.
These manipulators know it's an illusion, and they know we're creating it through our minds, and so they know if they program our minds with the right illusion, we'll create it physically. And the education system is massively, massively part of that. That is why we are pressured from cradle to grave not to figure it out.
All right. Welcome back to Freethinker Radio, 90.1 KPFT Houston and the Conscious Resistance. My name is Derrick Broze. I'm here with Micah Jackson. Thanks to everybody who's been tuning in. That was Power Through People with Steve Grant, and the song was called His Story. They're both activists. Vinny, PTP, Power Through People, is from like the Jersey area. Steve Grant's from Miami. You can find lots of their music all over the internet.
Music all over the internet. That's one good thing about the internet. And I really want people that when they like any music we play, please check out these acts, because we spend so much time on the news. We usually have a 2-hour episode back in the day and on the HD channel and such, and we play a lot more music than we're able to in our 1 hour. We squeeze in everything we can. It means the world to us, but we feel like we almost have to rocket through it and get back to the news because
there's a lot to cover. And right now, I do think that it's both. We love sharing music and we love talking about the information, because right now, especially being able to do this on KPFT on the FM airwaves in Houston, we know that we're offering you a perspective that you're not going to be hearing on any of the other stations in Houston, and maybe not even on any other show on KPFT.
And we're thankful for them keeping us around.
Yeah, we're thankful for them to keep allowing us to do it and to allow a different opinion. Because for those who don't know, before we get back into the news, KPFT just celebrated 50 years of being broadcast in Houston. 50 years, one of the longest, definitely the longest running community station, because there's no other independent news in Houston really. You have a couple other stations, but those I don't want to name anybody's name in badmouth, but the other kind of somewhat independent station is funded by corporate sponsors,
or NPR,
or things like that. So we have this awesome opportunity, and we've been apart for the last couple of years, to be a part of a community-funded radio station without commercials, without corporate sponsors, or anything like that.
With a
shows
history.
like ours, and 50-year history.
They got bombed off the air from the KKK because people don't like the ideas being discussed. They're threatened by the ideas, but KPFT isn't. And, I miss being there from time to time. I miss the good microphones. I miss everything.
Definitely miss being in the studio for sure. If anybody can support, please do visit kpft.org.
One of the things up on the wall there is that as long as I can communicate, I am free. And as long as people can fund KPFT, KPFT can communicate. So if maybe you're not in Houston, but you think, wow, having a station in a big city doing that, it's a good idea. I'm gonna throw $5 at it. If you would throw some bucks at a guy on the corner occasionally, maybe this is just as valuable.
So just support KPFT however you can. We definitely appreciate it. We're gonna continue broadcasting on them until, hopefully a long time. But no matter what happens,
for
we'll be
50 more years.
Yeah. But let's get to this next story. So, Micah, did you hear there's a lawsuit where the Republican lawmakers are challenging the governor, Greg Abbott, also a Republican, his $295 million contact tracing deal. Yeah. Isn't it weird how a lot of these, quote, conservatives and Republicans are now supporting all sort of, socialized government programs? And I get it. People are like, we're in a pandemic. We need renters relief. We need this. We need that. But it's just interesting to see it happen under the guise of a Republican governor or, government and president.
I don't want to say we have a one-party system, but we've been through Bush and Obama, right? Remember them, and they both supported the stimulus. You think that when Trump gets out of office, the stimuluses that they're discussing are going to end? No, there's certain things that are going to stay the same, and that's what these campaign contributors that can contribute to both parties know, and so they do. They keep this up. So don't be surprised that your GOP lawmakers do things that are pro-big state.
Well, at least some of them, it seems, are trying to resist that. Says that the governor has so far resisted calls for us. Now, I think this is kind of tyrannical in a way, as far as if you're having some representative system, right? The governor refuses calls to have a special legislative session to address the pandemic, and instead has chosen to issue over 20 sweeping executive orders. That's not, I don't think, how the system's supposed to run, right?
No,
I'm not going to meet with you guys. Here's just 20 executive orders.
Where do laws come from? They come from the legislative branch. This guy is making executive orders. This is the problem with what we're seeing. These aren't laws.
And it's not just the federal government and you've been saying this in recent shows, because I tend to, and I still do think this is true, but I also hear your point as far as if it's a local body, then maybe we have more of an opportunity to have an effect on it. But at the end of the day, who cares if the tyranny comes from the federal government,
the
local government, the cops, the state government, the DHS, or the military? If it's a boot on your neck, it's a boot on your neck. So this story says 5 Republican Texas legislators have sued Governor Greg Abbott on Monday, angry with the controversial $295 million contact tracing contract that he awarded to a relatively small Dallas area firm without approval from the Texas legislature. So think about this, taking taxpayer funds of $295 million.
Without legislation.
No legislation, executive orders, just signing contracts with some unknown firm that I guarantee you he's probably related to in some way, or somebody he knows is getting some,
we're going to follow up on that.
Extra money. Well, there's a little bit in this article that kind of talks about, people are already asking those questions, thankfully. So this relatively obscure firm gets this $295 million deal with no approval from the legislature, no sort of semblance of the people were represented and we voted on it, even if that's BS in the first place. So it says state reps, Mike Lang, blah, 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 a bunch of Republicans, sued Abbott, a fellow Republican, as well as the Texas Department of State Health Services and Frisco-based MTX Group in Travis County District Court for violations of the Texas Constitution. They claim that Abbott, quote, failed to follow competitive bidding rules when he awarded the contract while the lawmaking body was out of session. So he did it while everybody's at home on vacation or whatever, or just home from COVID. They want the court to void the contract and halt payments from the state. The 25-page complaint says the request for a proposal for the contract was inadequate, the contract bid process was a sham, and the contract impermissibly exceeds 2 years. The second reason to invalidate the contract is that the Texas Constitution requires a separation of power, and that separation leaves policy-making decisions with the Texas legislature. These decisions are not changed by pandemics. So at least it seems like in this case, some of these 6 Republicans in the whole state of Texas care about this and think it's a big deal. And I'm sure the Democrats, and like you said, most of them, they all support this. It's probably also such a big deal that there might be other things attached to it. If the governor and his buddies put other stipulations in there, because this small company nobody's ever heard of gets $300 million almost, just out of nowhere.
For contact
tracing, which is
where's the productivity in that? I mean, will you have the list of contacts that are traced? I mean, where's the productivity in that? And I don't know. It's a lot of money.
Well, it's not. The contact tracing is controversial for a number of reasons. For one, because obviously, as you mentioned earlier, they're talking about keeping a track of all the people who aren't wearing masks and the warnings and citations and everything. But with contact tracing, it can be a tracking device. We've already seen, I think just today, now Virginia became the first state to start using the Google and Apple API for the phones for the contact tracing apps. And so that's rolling out now. And so people are concerned about the privacy, but also there's arguments about how effective it is in the first place, and actually tracking anything. But whatever, they're going to go ahead and spend $300 million of taxpayer money. All right, let's move on to Australia. I mean, is there any other more tyrannical place on the planet right now?
Oh my God!
I mean, there clearly are, but I mean, there's a
lot of competition going on. There's a lot of competition going on for most tyrannical. Maybe we should do that each year. The Free Thinker Radio most tyrannical,
most tyrannical country of the of the year award. So, if we have any listeners in Australia who are tuned in right now, or hopefully those later, we would love to hear your comments about what you're dealing with, because we're talking specifically about Melbourne, I believe, and what is known as the ADF, the Australian Defence Force, which sounds nice and friendly and neighborly, is going door to door, Micah,
to defend you,
door to door to keep people safe from COVID. The ADF door knocking.
You got a 99.5 survival rate, but hey,
the ADF door knocking finds COVID patients are still going to work while infected. Those asymptomatic
greedy bet.
It's
they
interesting.
Probably wanted food,
but it's interesting that that's the title that ABC.Australia chooses to go with, instead of the kind of like, hey, people are getting their houses knocked door. I mean, because I guess it's not outlandish anymore. We've already seen here in the United States, the Kentucky couple we talked about 2 weeks ago getting a freaking ankle monitor that tracks if they leave their house.
For not signing a piece of paper.
For not signing a paper saying that they agreed with the terms and conditions of being quarantined or isolated. So, I mean, is anything new in this new normal? Is anything surprising?
They're basically being arrested for not quarantining. And why were they being quarantined? Because they went somewhere, right?
Well, they wanted to go travel to see grandma, and they took a test, and the test said that it was positive. And that's the thing. Even if at that point you're like, hey, I dispute this, the efficacy of these tests, it doesn't matter. You tested positive. You need to quarantine. You don't want to sign the paper? We're going to show up at your house in hazmat suits with cops with guns, and we're going to put an ankle monitor on you. That is freaking crazy. Like,
yeah,
I still
that's arrest.
I still can't. All right. So in Australia, Victorian Premier Daniel Andrews says that people are still going to work after testing positive, and the Australian Defence Force personnel have been door knocking and checking on people who are supposed to be self-isolating after contracting the virus. Mr. Andrews said 30 ADF teams have door knocked almost 800 properties so far, with 269 visited on Wednesday. Wow, they're visiting almost.
If it saves one life.
They're visiting almost 300 people's homes a day. Think about that. Now, I don't want this to be seen as criticism or blamed, but I'm obliged to point out that there were a number of people who were not home.
That's not blame.
They're like, we showed up and you were supposed to be quarantined. You were not there. And of course, they will be referred to Victoria Police.
Well, my one statement I had during
All right. We're there. Can you guys hear us again? I think there was a brief loss when you grabbed this.
There's someone. Oh,
Knocked
no,
it
tell
out.
me.
All right, we're back. So let's go on to the next one, Mike. I know you got a couple of stories.
No audio, no audio, no audio. P.S. There's no sound.
We got it fixed now. They got to catch up.
Prove it's found. Both muted. Yeah, I will.
No, it's back on. They just got to catch up.
Yeah, catch up.
Unmute. There you go.
Yeah.
Mute yourself.
Echo.
All right, cool. Let's continue. They will catch up. So crazy Australians. Sorry, guys, you're dealing with that stuff. We got people here.
Hey, it's crazy in America.
We got ankle monitors. They're going searching houses. Like if you have the wrong license plate and you're coming from one state that's a hot spot to another, they will make sure that you quarantine for 14 days.
So
or
much
whatever.
for your freedom of travel. Right?
You know, they're talking about rolling out these COVID pass, the immunity passports, and all these things so that we can get back to normal and being able to travel and these sort of things.
Just remember what Art Acevedo said. If it saves lives, we got
Guys,
guns.
One quick
If it saves
announcement.
lives.
One quick announcement I want to make that's not COVID related, and maybe it's a little bit of positive news, hopefully, is that the trial, the lawsuit that has been continuing for what's actually been on a break for about a month or so. I went and reported on it earlier in the summer. That trial is going to resume tomorrow. It's Fluoride Action Network, Food and Water Watch, 20 or 30 different groups that are basically coming together, and they've sued the EPA, saying that the EPA is essentially ignoring their own rules and has allowed something as dangerous as fluoride, which if you're skeptical to that, I really recommend going back and reading some of my articles about this. If you just search the hashtag fluoride trial or things of that sort, if you just go to the Freethinker Radio page on Facebook or our website, you'll see some of the information. But the Fluoride Action Network is fighting this lawsuit, and they have been able to present all kinds of information. The judge was ready to rule back in late June, but he basically said, before I make this big decision, he was asking the EPA, do you want to revisit this petition? Because they filed this petition under the Toxic Substance Control Act saying that, hey, fluoride doesn't meet these standards. It's kind of the short version of it. The EPA initially denied it, and a lawsuit ensued. It's been 4 years, and now we're at this point where the judge is literally hours away from probably ruling on this case, in the case that could be the end of water fluoridation in the United States and potentially other places. But tomorrow what's going to happen is the judge is going to come back. The EPA representatives and the Fluoride Action Network attorneys are going to meet with the judge. It's going to be on Zoom for those who want to watch it in the courtroom. And he gave them time to decide if they can come to an agreement. But it doesn't seem like either side is going to come to an agreement. I don't think EPA is all of a sudden going to say fluoride's a danger. And I know for a fact that the Fluoride Action Network feels confident about their case and all the evidence they presented. So once they tell the judge that, the judge will probably then set a date for him to come back and issue his ruling. So there won't be any ruling tomorrow, but it is going to be the next step. And if anybody wants to check that out, visit fluoridealert.org, and you can find out. They have like a new video and Q&A section on their website all about the lawsuit if you want to get caught up on that. But we will have more information on that next week.
Just a little interesting point. Houston spends more than $4 million, right, on what is it, every 4 years for a contract for hydrofluoric acid?
Yeah, and there's other, I mean, it's the same thing with these other
millions of dollars a year.
Other cities, if you're in some major city or even in a small city, more than likely you're spending at least hundreds of thousands of dollars, in some places millions
to buy an
of dollars.
industrial waste product, right? I mean,
Yep.
This isn't fluoride like a fluoride pill you take, right? I mean, this is hydrofluoric acid.
Yeah, and it's a pretty. I mean, this is a topic that I've talked about, and that we were involved with a group called Fluoride Free Houston for a couple of years, and talking about it through the radio show for years. And it's one of the things where you get called crazy, where people say things like, "Oh, Dr. Strangelove," and just dismiss any conversation around this, despite the growing body of evidence. So for me, it's been very much, I guess, vindicating to see this information brought to a court and have a judge who has, whatever we think about that position, his opinion and his view has more sway than some troll on Facebook, right?
Yeah.
To hear a judge listen to the evidence and being confronted with it,
have to listen to
and clearly believing that there's something to listen to, and
exactly,
and
otherwise
asking
they
for
wouldn't
more.
accept emotions.
Exactly. So it's been really empowering, and I'm excited to see where it goes.
And I think there's a lot of reasons, and I don't want to go too long on fluoride, but there's a lot of reasons to, you kind of said that thing about you're called crazy, and it made me have to say this. There's a lot of reasons to resist fluoridation of water. And it's not just the Dr. Strangelove things. I mean, and it seems weird to say it now in the middle of a pandemic, but what about the forced medication? Because they're telling us that they're putting it in the water just for our teeth, as if we
taxpayer funded.
Yeah, as if we don't have toothbrushes and floss and come on.
Yeah, and we're going to now switch gears. We got about probably 8 minutes or so left on the show before we hang up for the evening. And we actually got some new music tonight, as Micah mentioned. I think it might have cut out earlier. If you didn't hear, we do have a place. If you go to theconsciousresistance.com, there's a submit music tab. And I just realized some of you guys have been doing that, and I've been totally unaware. So I went through there and I found lots of cool music, and we're going to be playing that. So if you ever have suggestions, if you want us to play your music, it gets played on FM radio in Houston on 90.1 KPFT, as well as on our show here.
The music you've been submitting to me, I've been getting.
Micah's been getting it. I haven't been getting it. But if you have music for us, send it to us. Send it to the Free
But you
Thinker
got good
Radio
music.
page.
You get good music in your travels.
But,
good music.
Yeah, so let's get into this last section. We're going to talk some economics, financial scene. I'm going to start us off with Micah. The digital dollar is back.
The digital dollar.
The digital dollar is not dead. Many of us heard about this when the CARES Act, the first package of stimulus that happened in the coronavirus back in March or April. There was initially a discussion about including some sort of digital dollar as part of this receiving the stimulus.
Only way you could get it.
Yeah, exactly. And that was eventually dropped from the final version. But I will say right now they're debating a new stimulus. There's the Democratic and the Republican version. One's called the HEALS Act. One's called the HEROES Act. And they're trying to.
They're arguing between a trillion and 3 trillion. And it probably should be somewhere in between there. And then they'll be back again in
another couple months or so. Yeah. So don't be surprised if, as this talk goes on that we're showing you right now and that we're about to get into, if that reappears in the form of one of these new stimulus bills. So this one says that Giancarlo, who is the former CFTC chairman, which is the Commodities Future Trading Commission, J. Christopher Giancarlo advocated again for the development of a digital dollar in a Senate hearing focused on economic competition with China. So he says that the development of a digital version of the U.S. dollar must entail many facets, and the best way to start would be through a series of pilot programs that examine specific applications. And he told this was about a week ago, to the Senate Banking Committee's Subcommittee on Economic Policy. He has emerged as a leading advocate for the digital dollar since his term in the CFTC ended in April 2019. And he testified that this should be a part of the U.S. competition between China, that China is expected to be the first major economy to issue a sovereign digital currency as early as next year, which will be highly tracked, just like the rest of everything in China.
Have fun.
A prospect that some national security experts have suggested could pose a threat to the U.S. dollar's dominance over the global financial system. But the question of whether the U.S. needs to follow suit is not only a geopolitical one, according to him. And he has stressed that policymakers should view the dollar as a technology in itself. Quote, how do we enhance its technological capability in the world? This is what China is experimenting today in their own currency to make it technologically superior by making it digital, tokenizable, fractionizable, and programmable. America needs to start experimenting too, he said. And earlier in a different hearing, he also told the Department of Treasury said that the Department of Treasury should start conducting pilot tests for this. And he said to, quote, future-proof the dollar, the U.S. has to approach a potential technological upgrade in the same way we explored space, with a series of deliberate pilot programs, each one building on the one before. And he said, to his credit, and we'll see how much weight this actually has, that the pilot should focus on issues such as privacy, financial inclusion, and areas that are, quote, underserved by banks, whole payments, and international payments. So, yeah, just to put it out there, there's still that call. And I've seen recently in the news, Micah, the mainstream's debunked this idea that some people think we're going to a cashless society. That's fake news. That's not actually true. Nobody's out there talking about doing that, trying to go cashless. It's just one of your crazy friends.
Yeah. Then you can hide the inflation a little bit more, right? I mean, it'll be a little bit more abstract, right? A little bit more hard to understand what's going on, right?
Yeah, now it's also as part of this,
separate from the whole tracking you.
Yeah, exactly.
And
The whole
being fiat and
tracking, but also being able to lock people out if it's a completely digital system and maybe your score is too low. Maybe you're not wearing the mask, so they're tracking you. And you got
maybe you didn't get tested.
Maybe you got too many mask warnings.
Probably
or you didn't get tested. And now, well, sorry, Micah, you lost access to your digital dollar wallet, and you're not going to get that stimulus. But if you take this vaccine, then we'll get you right back to
But
normal.
they'll come by to see if I'm staying home, and if not, fine.
Oh yeah, Micah, are you home? We came by, you weren't home, so we froze your stimulus payments because you're violating the rules. And that's what can happen in this digital technocracy. We got this story here I pulled up for you, Micah, about the next stimulus check, which I guess we were kind of getting into a little bit already. You want to grab that one?
Oh yeah, the second stimulus.
check.
Well, you knew it was coming. After more than a week's worth of meetings, at least some clarity is emerging in the bipartisan. They're working together to loot you. Talks on a huge COVID-19 response bill. So they're prepping you, huge negotiation. Negotiators are still stuck, but trying. A combative meeting Wednesday involving top Democrats and Postmaster General, and a souring tone from both sides indicate that long slog remains. They have to argue about how they're going to spend the money, et cetera, right? White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows threatened afterward that President Trump is exploring options to use executive authority to extend a partial eviction ban and address unemployment benefits. More of that Republican socialism, right? After some movement Tuesday in in House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's direction on aid to states and local governments and unemployment insurance benefits, Wednesday's session offered no breakthroughs or major progress, participants said afterwards. So they're basically arguing about how to split the money up. Multiple issues remain, but some areas are likely agreement are coming into focus. And jobless benefits is one. They're taking a big stand on that. Aid to state and local government. This is something that's really bothered me ever since we started hearing about it, is bailing out the broke states. We hear about no taxation without representation. People can choose to do what they want in California, New York, Texas, and you don't have to suffer for it. Well, if all of a sudden the feds are going to bail out the broke states, then we're all buying the bad legislation. See what I'm saying there? So yeah, aid to state and local governments. House is looking to spend $150 billion in new appropriations to help state and local governments alleviate revenue losses and damage that the coronavirus has wrought on the economy.
So, I mean, it's like you said.
Economic stimulus, another $1,200. Education.
They're just arguing about the details, right?
Yeah.
Of and I do think that some of the details are significant. I don't want to downplay
PPP
all
again.
of them. Because, they're asking for more protective equipment. But I saw that some of the debates are around, should there be rent?
No, the paycheck protection program where they loan it to the bank. And all this money, the last time, all the loans had to come from banks. So the money was printed by the Fed, then went to banks to be on their balance sheet, then got loaned out.
Well, and we talked before about BlackRock and how big of a role.
They've made 25% increase since this pandemic. So I just heard their rate of increase.
Sure, these banks are going to be getting even more wealthy off this. But what I was trying to say is that basically there's some partisan debates on okay, should some of this go towards? I saw some debate over immigrant programs, or should some go to rent relief. But ultimately, they're agreeing. And maybe some see this as a success that, the bipartisan agreement finally to see that the American people need help. I guess, you can see something like that. But to me, I would say it's just they can come together when it involves taking your tax dollars and using it for things like that, where the people get pennies, but then the banks get millions and billions of dollars. And these people continue, not to mention the other pieces we've already gone over, contact tracing, the vaccines. You're all paying for it. The cops that are killing people, you're all paying for it.
And you know how we talked about there's other stuff in there? How about the $2 billion new FBI headquarters in Washington, D.C., or the $30 billion for the Pentagon that's put in there? That includes direct help for powerful defense contractors. Yeah, they argue that might get dumped. We'll see. I think they're going to argue back and forth so that at the end of the day, in the 11th hour, they can come to an agreement and save the world with the bailout, the stimulus, whatever it is, the bipartisan agreement. No, it's not perfect, but we tried. Here's some money.
Oh, man. Is there any way out, Micah? Is there any way out of the economic enslavement of the debt-based society, of the fleecing of the people? I had a conversation. I don't want to get too long-winded to this as we wrap up, but I had somebody that's always coming on my Facebook page to debate me and to troll me, basically. I mean, and I don't mean in the sense that he has an opinion, right? We're just difference of opinion, but he just comes in always wanting to start an argument, right? And so I sent him a message and just said, because he is the kind of person that looks at Australia and says, good, they should be fined. They should be going door to door. And I told him, I said, your mentality is part of the problem. The way you're talking is dangerous. And I just told him, I was like, it's dangerous for you to think that this is justified, that they have some ability, some freedom, some authority to do this. And, we kind of went back and forth through private message. But ultimately he came to, and this is just what I thought was interesting. He said, well, I'm a socialist, so I don't believe in the current system. I want to create something new. And I'm like, I'm right there with you. He's like, but I'm working within it in the meantime. But he said, I believe in the consent of the governed. That's what we believe. And I said, you say you believe in the consent of the governed, but you're also saying you're okay with mask mandates and vaccine mandates. How is that consent? It's
the lack of critical thinking. You can hold whatever position in your heart that you're moved to, right? But you need to bring that in balance with your mind, right? You need to find some consistency. If you're moved for compassion for people, then be compassionate for them. And if it could be, you're concerned for freedom, or maybe even just let's go, you're concerned for the medical concern. Well, be consistent.
Yeah, and it's just, I mean, the question I was asking is like, is there a way out? Because I've been touching on the last recent episodes, and I did an article last week about the Great Reset with the World Economic Forum.
Well, that's another one, like the new normal, right?
Yeah, exactly. So they're saying it's time to reset capitalism, to reset all these systems. COVID has shown that these systems are frail and they're weak, and so we need. And it just sounds like more central planning to me. I don't care what you call it. It sounds like central.
I feel like the fascist and the communist, the fascist and the socialist have figured out that they have more in common. And they are like, statists unite.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, so is there a way out?
Enemy.
If there's a way out, I think it's by coming together and trying to focus on solutions more than ever, trying not to be dismissive, because for everything we say, there are people out there who are asking questions, who are skeptical, and even the people who maybe you wear a mask, maybe you don't wear a mask. I don't want to.
I don't want to make you not wear a mask.
I don't want to encourage anybody to shame anybody, is my point. Like, right? Like, because the thing is, I went over a couple of studies this week, man. Like, one's from Yale, one's published in the New England Journal of Medicine, and they're talking about how can they convince the public to take the COVID vaccine. And one of them was trying to have a shame message. The other one was an embarrassment message. How embarrassed would you feel if you didn't get the vaccine and people you know got sick? How angry would you be? You know, these different methods.
Manipulation.
And so they're trying to figure out what is the best messaging that's going to get people and convince
rhetoric,
them, shame them, make them feel good about themselves, whatever.
It's not about just presenting the facts.
Exactly. And if the facts aren't enough, if people aren't, if people don't feel concerned enough on their own by the stats and the numbers, then, it's like if the things are bad, why would you have to force the vaccine, right? Why would you have to pressure people this much if things were that bad where people felt it and they're like, okay, I don't trust these people. If something's going on, I'm going to take my chances. I'm getting this vaccine. And that doesn't seem to be the case. Yes, there are a lot of people who are ready to sign up day one.
Okay, let me just say, crazy new vaccine in one hand, 99.5% survival rate in the other. I don't know, maybe that's why they have to sell it.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of where we're at. And we had a great comment here. It's fear disguised as altruism.
Which is still horrible.
And I do think that's true as well. And someone else says, I don't ever hassle people who wear masks. It's always the other way around. And somebody else, I agree. I'm sick of shaming.
See, this fear disguised as altruism. I really like the quote because I find it repugnant, but I like it because it attacks two major problems for freedom. The whole idea that, being moral as long as you're doing something for someone else. Right, that your own individuality doesn't matter. That you are a sacrificial.
Think
animal.
of the collective interest.
Exactly.
That's what the
so those two
chief
go
of
hand
police in Houston is saying.
Exactly.
It's freaking worrying me. It's just
altruism is a dangerous philosophy, and it's not necessarily good because it argues, that your being is just giving up to other people, and you're free to give yourself to other people, but to act like that's what you ought to do, that's your morality. I mean, that's a massive ethical presupposition.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we're in a situation where, like you said earlier about the lack of critical thinking, even if people aren't cognizant of what you just mentioned and these levels of it, they're still just repeating what they're being told. The messaging is getting out to enough people that the message is shame those. Like I walked into a mutual friends earlier today, right? And I forgot that, I just don't really wear the mask. I mean, if I go into a store, I hate it and I don't like it, but I have to do it, right? I don't shame people for doing this.
Yeah, I can choose not to go to the store.
Exactly. But then, so somebody requested like, hey, if you come in my house in the hallway, wear the mask, right?
Yeah.
Like, okay, it's your house, right?
Yeah.
So again, that's fine. I forgot my mask, and the person who was coming to get me from outside didn't wear his mask either. So I got yelled at by a roommate of like, did you just go outside to get him and you didn't wear a mask? You were out in the hallway with all these other people and you didn't wear and I just I'm going to go in the other room and just, but that's how some people
are passionate about this.
And it's scary though. It's scary because this, and maybe it was just this person.
And it's global.
Yeah, and it is everywhere. It's unfortunate. It's in Australia. It's in the U.S. All right, guys, I got a song we're going to play. We're going to close out with from, let me see who this is. This is one of the ones that was sent to me, submitted via the Conscious Resistance.
There you go.
Dubfire, King in My Empire, featuring Cornell Campbell. It's a remix, and yeah, check this out. We're going to play this as we close out for today. Anything else, Micah?
We love you.
Thanks for listening, guys. We'll be back next week for another episode of Freethinker Radio here on the Conscious Resistance at 90.1 KPFT Houston. Until next time, you know the drill. Stay chill. We'll be back.
Stay chill.
Peace.
Yeah.